In today's video, I'll be discussing several different subjects related to conquering the bully of diabetes, including how one man brought his A1c down from diabetic levels to an incredibly low 4.7 in about a year, losing 86 pounds in the process. Also, we'll hear about a man from Pakistan who's gone from blood glucose levels in the 200s to a fasting glucose of 100 in a single month. What we're seeing over and over again is that there is a key to beating diabetes, and as we learn about this key, we discover that this is a universal key, which knows no national or cultural boundaries. All right, another comment. Thank you, thank you. Gives me two thank yous, both with exclamation points. I can't tell you how much you helped me. I'm sitting in the hospital now a day after knee replacement surgery. A year ago, my doctor told me they couldn't do surgery unless I lose 50 pounds and bring my blood sugar down. So he needed a knee replacement for some time, but they said, we won't do it until you can get that blood sugar down and lose some weight. So he sent me home with a low-calorie, low-fat diet. Exactly wrong. Low-calorie, low-fat diet. He sent me to a dietitian who gave me a diet of high carbs, low calories, low fat. Exactly wrong from my point of view. And, if you're wanting to beat diabetes, let me just say that. Well, January 11th of 2019, I met you, started my keto diet. In December 2018, my A1c was 7.0 2 weeks ago. So basically about a year now he's been doing this. Listen now, A1c was at 7, a year later, 4.7. This guy's made it down into the fours. Amazing, he says, exclamation point. I've lost 86 pounds. The staff in the hospital are amazed with my numbers. They're working with me on food. The dietitian keeps trying to add carbs, but I say no. Love it. Dietitian keeps saying, now you haven't had enough carbs. You've got to have more carbs. He says, no, not going to do it. He says, before taking my pain meds at bedtime, I had to eat something, so I would try to explain I don't usually eat this late, but I finally gave in, ate some peanut butter and crackers, hope to go home today and will be better. But I thought that was so sad. The dietitian keeps trying to add carbs. Why? Is it that we need 100 grams or 200 grams of carbs per day to be healthy? No. It's like saying to an alcoholic, have you had your whiskey for the day? Have you had your bourbon today? Have you had 7 good helpings of bourbon today? This guy's an alcoholic. He's destroying his liver. He's destroying his life. He's lost his family. He's ruined his life by alcohol. And you're trying to tell him to have 7 helpings of alcohol per day? What kind of ridiculous advice is that? But it's not much different from telling a diabetic to have 7 helpings of starches and sugars and lots of carbs. Well, some people are stuck in a time warp. They're living back in the 1970s. Now, I can remember the 70s. Some of you people, you younger people, you can. I can remember them well. I lived through that time. There were a lot of good things about the 70s, but one thing that wasn't so good was the pseudoscience that was coming out and telling everybody to eat low-fat, high-carb, and don't worry about the sugar. Low-fat, high-carb, don't worry about the sugar. Worry about the fat. The fat will kill you. The fat will make you diabetic. The fat will make you obese. Fat makes you fat. That's why it's called fat. Fat will make you fat. But carbs, they're the answer. Faulty science, bias, and just stupidity. We've come a long way, baby, since then. And the research and the studies have shown that a keto diet or a low-carb, relatively high-fat diet will help you in every way, in terms of diabetes, in terms of obesity, in terms of cardiovascular problems. That's the answer. And it will cause your triglycerides to take a nosedive. But, imagine if you saw somebody who was wearing clothes like they did back in the 50s. And he used the words they use, like swell and golly gee. And he drove a 1950s car. You'd think, that's a very strange guy. 50s were a great time, I suppose. I was born in the 50s. But who wants to be stuck back then? We've made a lot of progress. In the 50s, there were no cell phones. In the 50s, there was no internet. We've made a lot of progress since then. And some people are dietarily stuck in the 1970s. And that's all they want to do is talk about the low-fat, high-carb diet. There is a particular doctor I'm thinking of that's got a book out about the low-fat, high-carb diet, and he calls it a bold new approach to diabetes. But there's nothing bold and there's nothing new about it. That's what they were saying back in the 60s and 70s. And it didn't work then and it doesn't work now. Now, granted, if you cut out some sugar and lose some weight, you may help yourself. So there are people being helped by this guy. But that is, all the research has said the exact opposite. It's not bold, it's not new, it's wimpy and it's old. All right, enough preaching here. Respected sir, this person says, I was diagnosed with type 2 with an A1c of 13.7. That's very high. A year of following your channel, monitoring my blood sugar, finding foods that work for me, you helped me drop my A1c to 6.6. So that is a huge improvement, 13.7 to 6.6. He's got a little ways to go, but he's made phenomenal progress. He's a lot better off than he was with that 13.7. Here's where it gets interesting. He says, being an atheist, I was very skeptical when I saw your channel, but I rely on science, and the data speaks for itself. Let me rewind and play that again for you. He says, the data speaks for itself. Folks, when my wife, Benedict, and I do these blood sugar tests, guess what? We're not making this up. We've got no axe to grind. The truth is, I may be a little biased now. I've got some pretty strong opinions now, but when I first started having blood sugar problems, I would have grabbed at any diet that worked. In fact, I first went to a vegetarian diet because I read some things that made me think that would work. It didn't work. It made things worse for me. But I was not biased. It wasn't like I had to go this route. I just went with what worked. Anyway, he says the data speaks for itself. I want to genuinely thank you for saving my life. I'm only 31. I was losing the feeling in my feet. My doctor was worried. I didn't even know anything about this because I don't have health insurance. Your channel, along with some regular checkups, have been my savior. Thank you again. Well, there's only one Savior, but I understand what you're saying. It is brought about salvation for me in the area of diabetes, and I thank God for that. There's a verse that says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Some people just don't know. And, my mom had all kinds of diabetic complications, and she was trying to do what her doctor was telling her, which was keep your fat low, and, take certain medicines. She didn't know, and she ended up having a miserable last 10 years of her life and dying earlier than she should, although she did make it to 80. But I think she could have made it much longer had she known. But she was essentially destroyed, or at least her life was spoiled those last 10 years for lack of knowledge. And a lot of people are still that way today. The doctor says, you've got diabetes, gives you a little medicine, sends you to a dietitian. The dietitian just says, well, take it easy on the sugar and, try to cut the fat way down. And folks, it doesn't work. It's like that guy throwing the teaspoon of water at a forest fire. You look like you're doing something, but you're doing nothing at all. So, lack of knowledge. Here is another individual from Pakistan that commented. I read one of the comment from another Pakistani a little while back where he talked about going to a village diet. He went from a city diet, which was a lot of pastries and sugar and things like that, to a village. So here's another Pakistani who weighs in. He says, I'm from Pakistan also, and believe me, our grandparents and parents never suffered from diabetes. Very interesting. Well, guess what? Here in America, we're in the same boat, although we might have to go back to our great-grandparents, but most of the history of America, there wasn't any big diabetes epidemic. There is now, but there wasn't. So he says here in Pakistan, the same way. Our grandparents never suffered from diabetes. He says, you know why? Because they ate all the organic butter and cheese and cooked all meals in ghee. A village diet, as you call it. Well, my friend, that's from one of your fellow Pakistanis. I didn't make up the name, but I like the name. A village diet. In other words, leaving the city diet. He goes on to say, also they cook their meat with vegetables. Then people from my generation today went on fancy diets with white flour bread and margarine, white processed sugar instead of cane sugar. And yes, the burgers, the Cokes, the pizzas, okay, you in Pakistan have those as well. Well, I think there's probably no place hardly that you can't find Cokes anyway. Anyway, he says the Cokes, the pizzas, burgers, and donuts. So 1 month back, I was diagnosed with diabetes, which was inevitable. I think that's interesting. In other words, living like I do, eating like I do, and probably he had a propensity toward diabetes physiologically. He says it was inevitable, but after watching your videos and Dr. Berg's, I've cut my carbs to a minimum of 30 grams per day. That's a strong reduction. I would guess that most Americans are eating somewhere north of 250 grams of carbs per day, and he's down to 30. He says, I started eating eggs and cheese for breakfast and salads and meat for my second meal. Sounds like he's doing 2 meals a day, which is smart, especially if you're needing to get your blood glucose down in a hurry. He said, I've also started using ghee and olive oil. Yeah, a couple of good friends for diabetics. Hope to give some good news as I monitor my blood sugar levels almost every day. They've come down to 100 on fasting, not more than 140, 1.5 hours after food. So those are great numbers. 100 fasting glucose, not more than 140, 1.5 hours after food. He says, I'm taking metformin, but I'm still pleased. I went down something like 240, from something like 240 to these numbers. I intend to beat diabetes, good for you, my friend, and taper off my meds altogether. Your videos are really inspiring. Thank you so much. Well, my friend, you're doing great already. And don't be ashamed that you're taking metformin. I personally think it's good to ease off of it rather than just go cold turkey. I know we've had reports of people that just said, I'm not going to take a single thing and it worked for them. And it's not my job to tell you what to do or what not to do. But I personally think it's good to taper off rather than just go cold turkey. And let me just say the key to beating diabetes, if we could put it in the form of a key, it's not an American key, and it's not an African key, it's not a Middle Eastern key, it is a universal key. And the key is quit eating and stuffing yourself with so many carbohydrates and get back to eating the way people used to eat about 100 to 200 years ago. It will work in any country and any culture. Now, some of you from certain countries are saying, yeah, but my culture is so strong and eating a certain way that if I don't eat that way, they'll mock me, they'll criticize me, they'll ostracize me. It's going to cost me something. Well, guess what? In America, people look at you kind of funny too. Maybe not. It's not quite an issue, but still, when you turn down the pasta and when you refuse to eat the dessert everybody's eating, people are going to look at you funny. So you got to be a little bit of a rebel. But your health is worth it. Folks, your health is more than worth it. And you've got to have a little bit of a rebel. I know coming from a background of Christianity where we teach about respecting authority, it may sound funny to hear me talk about being a rebel, but in some ways, Jesus himself was a rebel. He rebelled against the cultures and some of the traditions of his times. And you've got to be a little bit of a dietary rebel to beat diabetes. Well, I think that will do it for now. I appreciate you tuning in and watching these videos. Hope you find it helpful. Again, give it a like, subscribe if you haven't done that already, and click the bell icon so you'll be notified whenever we post new videos. God bless you. See you again soon.